Hi, this is day 6 of the 30-day Hacker Rank Challenge. Today we'll be talking about something called Let's Review. It's going to take in input and essentially does a very simple algorithm where it splits even and odd indexed characters within a string, and then it'll print the even and then print the odd characters with a space in the middle. So within the introduction, it talks about how many test cases you're supposed to take, so 1 all the way up to 10, and it talks about the length of the string from 2 to 10,000. And so the sample input is going to take hacker for the first test case. It's going to take the even indices, so H, C, E, and it's going to print those out, and then you'll print out a space, and then it'll take the odd indices, A, K, R, and then print those out. That's one test case. You're given 2, so you have to do the same with rank. Very simple, very easy problem. Probably one of the simplest algorithms you'll see moving into the future. And you can do this by a one-pass method, where you're just calling a for loop that goes over the indices and then attaches it towards a predefined variable for even and for odd. So we'll go through the code now. Once again, Python's very simple, and the syntax doesn't take a lot. It's very powerful, but it is an interpretive language, so you don't get as much control as you do with C++ or C. You also don't get as much of a memory boost as you do with C or C++, so it's about 100 times slower. If you use Cython, which is a C++ extension within Python, you can try to narrow that gap, but it's still an interpretive language. There's only so much you can do, and there's a lot of limitations towards memory based applications. So it usually calls C++ in the background and has Python at the foreground. It's very easy to learn, but we'll be going through Python over the next couple months. So you take a for loop and you take the input, which is a raw string, you convert it to an integer with the int function that's wrapped around the raw string. And range takes a couple different inputs. So the range function can take an integer, which goes from 0 to that integer not inclusive, which means it doesn't take the last value. Or it could have a start and stop index, or it can have a start, stop, and stride, which just means you're taking it by a certain length each time. You can also reverse it by having a negative stride, but that's not something we'll cover right now. In this scenario, we don't need to actually store the temporary integer during the range. So if you call for x in range, then every time you're going through, so every slot you go through within that for range will be stored in the x value that you can use for that particular iteration. However, we don't need to use it here, so we can just put an underscore. We're going to define our input. So for each test case that we're going through, we're given a word, so like hacker or rank, and then we can go through hacker or rank. So let's go through hacker. We're going to have an even and an odd defined string variable ahead of time, and I like to use a switch Boolean data type so that we can then switch between the two rather easily to make sure that we're doing even and odd instead of having to check whether it divides by 2. So in this scenario, we have to do another for loop. So for indices in range of the length of the word, so each index slot within the word, we're going to then store that index either in even or an odd by concatenating the already stored string variables. So in this case, we're looking at evens to be false and odds to be true. And so we check our switch Boolean data type to see if it's false. If it's false, then we add that index within the word to the even string variable. If it's not, then we add that index within the hacker word or within the rank word to the odd string variable. And after we go through that, we have to switch our Boolean type variable. So we have to switch the switch. So think of this as a light switch. So you have an on and off. And essentially when you have it off, it's going to be even. And when it's on, it's odd. So for Python, all you have to do is add the not modifier in front of your switch variable to then switch it to true, switch it to false, etc., etc. And then we use a simple print at the end. So let's go through the C++ version. It's going to require a lot more information associated with it. And so at the top, you have your header files. What's important here is that we include the IOStream file, which is the input-output. So syn, cout. We're using the namespace of the standard library, which means that our scope includes a standard library, so we don't have to do the std double colon for the namespace resolution. It's already defined here. So for example, we don't have to do std double colon syn. You can just write the word syn. So we define the test variable as an integer data type. We use syn to then load whatever, so however many amount of text cases that we're working with within the test variable. Then we do a simple for loop all the way up to including tests. Before I tried it without the less than or equal to, and it should have worked. For some reason, HackerRank wanted the less than or equal. Doesn't matter here. So instead of running it twice, we're running it 3 times. It should only be twice. Seems like there's a glitch in the system. So going further, for each test case, we define like a string variable. In this case, we're going to use the line string variable. And then we use getLine for each test case. We include syn within the first parameter and then our string variable in the second parameter. Once again, we have even and odd string variables defined for each test case. And we have the switcher Boolean data type. Now, it can't be switched, or it can't be switch, because that's actually a keyword in C++. So when you're looking at switching different test cases, so like if you have 1, 2, or 3, then you'd use switch to do that. And so we can't use switch here. It's already defined within the standard library for C++. Going further, you do a simple for loop for the size of the line string variable. And if it's even, the switcher will be false. So you append or concatenate that particular index within the line variable. If it's odd, then you concatenate to the odd string variable. And then you want to make sure you flip on and off your light switch. So instead of the not conditional that or modifier that we saw in Python, now we have an exclamation point that's essentially acting as a not for C++. And then once again, it was acting a little goofy. So I just made sure that it outputted correctly down here. Once again, Python's a lot easier. C++ is good to know if you're using anything with memory-intensive applications, or if you're using memory-intensive applications. I love Python. I'm going to keep teaching it. I hope you continue watching these videos and you stay for at least 30 days and then LeetCode algorithms. I look forward to seeing you on my channel. Like, subscribe, comment. Have a great day. Bye.